Thank you very much. Actually, it will be, I didn't know that, but the earlier discussion actually will spill over to this, because what I am going to talk to you about is something about, we discussed about, ensuring security at the device end. So I'll start by telling you that is nearly impossible. 10 years back, we used to have hardly one connected device that we would carry. Right now, we are carrying more than 2 connected devices. And even if we consider a mobile phone, it must be having 2 connections. Even if we really think about connections, both the connections might be having internet connectivity. When I was actually going through the news article of yesterday's Denmark's outage, I found out that there was the largest mobile network provider of Denmark. They asked people to use the VoIP rather than using the mobile network. So more or less, the telecom service provider is actually the internet service provider. But those two are completely different things. The telecom service provider might not be the internet service provider, because they too are different gamut of service deliveries. So when the telecom service got hit, the provider is asking its subscribers to go into the internet usage of it and use VoIP, voice over internet protocol. So that means every telecom connection must also have internet connection for redundancy. Do you accept it? Yes or no? Yes. So that means redundancy is the day. Why are we carrying 2 connections? Redundancy. Why are we connecting 2 connections, 2 internet connections along with 2 mobile connections? Redundancy. So how many redundancies would you take? To me, I carry 3 redundancies. Why? Because I do not want to remain unconnected to my office. Why? Because it requires me delivering real time. Just imagine, I have a mobile phone having 2 internet connections, 2 mobile telecom connections and 2 internet connections. I have a dongle, a separate dedicated internet connections. I have a pad which is also having internet connections. And then I actually log into secure Wi-Fi wherever I find one. So the redundancies is the call of the day, and similar with the devices. Many of you might be having more than 1 mobile devices, but you cannot call people using 2 mobile devices at the same time, but we do that. Why am I talking to you like this? Because it proves that connected device, the number of connected device cannot be mapped, or you cannot do census on that. When we were talking about finding out how many mobile connections or how many devices accessing the email, it is easy to find out. There are markers. You can just find it out by sending pings. But you cannot do it continuously, because the numbers, they get changed every time. So the best possible solution is exposure management. What is exposure? When we fought COVID, we actually fought with 2 gaj ki duri. That means you stay away from people and mask pehno to allow other people not get infected by you. Not that you will prevent infection. By wearing mask, I am helping others not to get infected. So it is high time we think in the same manner, and that is called exposure management. I'll quickly go through the presentation. It's a very brief presentation. I'll leave some food for thought with you. It's a new baby on the block. Think over it. Start listening, learning on this, because tomorrow many companies will come up on this stage and talk to you about that. So I am leaving a door for ObserveNow to actually find organizations who is going to sponsor them, their next program, because this is the new baby on the block. So, common vulnerability exposure, CVE. सर आप बता रहे थे, तो सर इसके लिए हर वक्त wherever there is a problem, there is a CVE coming out immediately. What is the common vulnerability exposure? But the problem is we actually take two things together, vulnerability and exposure. Vulnerability is inherent. Exposure, how are you managing that inherent vulnerability not going into outside? I would request, Tania ji to put to put this on your site so that everybody is taking snap and all. There is no IPR in that. I just collected the data and put it into a slide. I am not owning that slide. So you can just copy it, circulate it, do whatever you like. Because knowledge cannot have IPR, as far as I am concerned. So common vulnerability exposure should be like common vulnerability or common vulnerability when being exposed. The report does not talk about exposure, it always talks about the inherent vulnerability in it, and it points out the vulnerability that you have. And that vulnerability is to be actually benchmarked with OWASP or NIST, different standards, MITRE and different standards. You cannot go and actually comply with all the standards, not possible. Then you will never use any application, any device per se. So now time is there. We started actually looking into that how to reduce the exposure of our inherent vulnerability, because the number of devices that we use is unlimited or undefined. The number of exposures that all of them taken together are undefined too. So let us try not to expose those inherent vulnerabilities. So that's why vulnerability is overtly stressed upon. Exposure silently kills. We don't care about that. All vulnerabilities are not exposures and neither the vice versa. So if we think about how this endpoint security came into being. Endpoint security is absolutely called device security, whether device is physical or digital. Even a virtual machine is a virtual device. So device security is endpoint security. So endpoint security actually got over with the end of the last millennia. How? Because Y2K did not happen to those machines which were not connected, which remained unconnected on the 31st night of 1999. They did not face any problem regarding Y2K. So that means actually connectivity was the problem. That means exposure of the problem. But still today, till today, we talk about device-centric security. So 24 years down the line, we are talking about a dead issue. So the new millennia endpoints, actually new millennia endpoint ruled, but actually it depends upon an issue which was settled on 31st December 1999 night. The Y2K bug proved it. The rise of social media actually brought in this necessity of devices and connections and staying afloat and multi-connected, and the different networks. You have plethora of networks. Even this organization has networks like SWAN, MPLS and SD-WAN. So the new security that is, I'll cover it in next 2 minutes, don't worry. So the peripheral security is the new dragon in the room, or new elephant in the room, which is very expensive. You talk about firewall, sandbox, SIEM, SOAR, EDR, MDR, XDR. Let us talk about beyond that. That is exposure management. So peripheral security downside is we don't know how to create security tunnel. We pay money to VPN providers, knowing fully well most of the VPN algorithms are already available in the market, and lack of qualified manpower. We already talked about that. So what is exposure management? It looks beyond endpoints, assesses risk landscapes, network analysis on the go continuously, so that there will be a sandbox service in every network, and exposure of the access, not of the endpoint. Don't talk about endpoint security, talk about how much we would allow your endpoint to be available on the network. So the last but most important is piggyback protector. You will not allow anybody to come along with their own baggage. So the exposure management, why? Because it will prevent your assets exposure. It will help you prioritize your risk. It will give you a holistic view. Last, how would you do that? Start with asset inventory. इसका पूरा enumeration कीजिए, attack surface mapping कीजिए, VAPT and sandbox on the fly करते रहिए, और find out how to utilize the outcomes and how to attend to the outcomes, and continuous stress exposure management. I'll stop there. It is called CTEM, continuous threat exposure management. And if you want to do that, look into many open source solutions. I will leave yourself with Wazoo. Wazoo is one of the open source log analysis tools. Start paying people or start training yourself how to analyze logs by using Wazoo or the similar types of solutions. There are some slides. I have just pointed out some ports you should always take into account. Left are there, right I have added. Those are, and these are the places where you would be looking more into when you talk about continuous threat exposure management. Thank you very much. I am not going to take any more time because I have been given an assigned time. Thank you very much. God bless.